Quarterbacks are not evaluated the way we think they are. We say we care about performance, we say we care about results, but in practice, we care about narratives, and once a narrative forms, every throw is filtered through it. This matters most for young quarterbacks, especially those without draft capital protection, institutional patience, or built-in goodwill from teams and media. Shedeur Sanders is a clear example, not because he's perfect and not because he's a victim, but because his evaluation exposes where our systems of analysis quietly break down. Traditional quarterback analysis treats outcomes as isolated events. An interception is an interception. A sack is a sack. A loss is a loss. But football does not work that way. Quarterbacks operate inside constraints, including pass protection, receiver separation, play calling, game script, down and distance, and opponent quality. Yet most evaluations ignore those forces entirely. When constraints are not measured, blame is misassigned. Responsibility gets confused with visibility, and visibility almost always lands on the quarterback. That is why we introduced the fault-adjusted quarterback score, or fake QS, which separates what happened from who was actually responsible for it. An interception thrown under immediate pressure is not equal to a clean pocket mistake. A sack caused by unblocked pressure is not the same as holding the ball too long. A failed drive created by poor play calling is not identical to poor execution. When we apply fault adjustment to Shedeur Sanders, something important happens. The mistakes remain, but fewer of them belong entirely to him, and his performance becomes more stable than raw box scores suggest. FAQS does not defend quarterbacks. It defends causality. Now we add another force that almost never shows up in analytics, which is draft position. Draft slot does not just affect opportunity, it affects interpretation. The Draft Capital Pressure Index measures how draft position changes tolerance for mistakes, patience from coaches, tone of media coverage, and confidence runway. High draft picks are allowed to fail publicly and grow quietly. Late round picks are not. Shedeur falling to the 5th round did not just shape his opportunity, it shaped how every outcome was interpreted. This leads to a phenomenon called asymmetric status anchoring. Early status labels, like being a 5th round pick, are treated as permanent facts that explain opportunity, patience, and failure. Later achievements, however, are treated differently. When a quarterback becomes a Pro Bowl selection, that status is not accepted as a fact, but debated, contextualized, or dismissed. The same analysts who matter-of-factly repeat 5th round pick will hesitate to say Pro Bowler hit without qualifiers. One status anchors evaluation. The other is treated as negotiable. Every mistake becomes confirmation. Every success requires explanation. That is not intent. It is structure. Now we introduce timing, because recognition is not a final verdict. Recognition is a time-bound snapshot. Voting opens, voting closes, and then the season keeps going. Pro Bowl voting closed in mid-December. Several of Shedeur Sanders' best performances occurred before that window closed, while one of his worst games occurred after. But the commentary that followed did not ask what voters saw at the time. Instead, it asked how this recognition could be explained away. Later failures were pulled backward. The timing disappeared, and the Pro Bowl became evidence against him instead of context about him. This is timing-adjusted recognition bias, where recognition is judged using information that did not exist when it was earned, and it disproportionately affects quarterbacks without narrative protection. Now add media pressure, volume of coverage, tone after losses, repetition of draft labels, confidence reframed as arrogance, context selectively omitted. Pressure does not excuse mistakes, but it changes decision-making environments, especially for young quarterbacks still calibrating risk and trust. When we combine fault adjustment, draft capital pressure, asymmetric status anchoring, recognition timing, and media pressure, the picture becomes much clearer. Some quarterbacks fail and are allowed to grow. Others fail and are labeled. Shedeur Sanders' evaluation does not collapse under scrutiny. It sharpens. The mistakes remain, but responsibility shifts and narratives weaken. This framework does not ask for sympathy. It asks for accuracy. Quarterback performance is response to pressure, to support, to expectations, to how failure is framed and remembered. When evaluation ignores those forces, it fails. When evaluation accounts for them, clarity emerges. This is not about defending a player. It is about defending analysis. Not all failures are equal. Be honest. Stop projecting. Based on facts, well, keep that same energy. Every system claims it evaluates fairly. Very few examine how their conclusions are actually formed. In theory, analysis is about evidence. In practice, it is about preserving coherence. Draft position becomes destiny. Recognition becomes suspicious. Failure becomes essence. When new information appears, we do not ask what it means. We ask how to fit it into what we already believe. That is not analysis, that is narrative maintenance. Real evaluation requires something harder. It requires updating beliefs when evidence changes, separating outcome from responsibility, and acknowledging timing, pressure, and context. Quarterbacks do not play in isolation. They play inside systems, inside expectations, and inside stories already written for them.